Misc Rewind, 133 East 64th Street. If a building could blush. Welcome back. Today's post comes from Christopher Gray. A version of this article was published in the New York Times on September 20th, 2009. A link to the written version of this post with historical images is in the show notes. Next time I'll be digging into some of the research behind this column. You'd think someone controlling billions of dollars in assets would live on Park or even Fifth Avenue, but Lexington Avenue is a street of surprises, including Bernard Madoff's former apartment house at the corner of East 64th Street, built in 1927 for a social register crowd that eschewed the typical well-to-do East Side address for an old shoe life in the slow lane. Compared with the prestige of Fifth, Madison, and Park, Lexington above 59th is a sort of hand-me-down address, with altered brownstones and mid-grade apartment houses, in keeping with its lower rung on the social ladder. But in the 1920s, a rump group of well-to-do Upper East Siders lit out for Lexington, and a modest crop of truly luxury buildings sprouted in the otherwise middling soil of this unassuming street. These typically had one or two apartments of 10 or 13 rooms per floor, as does Mr. Madoff's old building, 133 East 64th Street. Most developers of a typical 100-foot by 100-foot corner lot would have squeezed in at least 4 units. The architect of number 133 was Kenneth Murchison, a Beaux Arts bon vivant, who had already designed Emily Post's co-op at 79th and Madison, a project that she initiated with a few friends. It is hard to tell if number 133 was also built by a group of acquaintances instead of a developer, but it's in a tasteful and unshowy neoclassic style, with Greek-inspired window frames, attenuated pilasters, and a Vitruvian wave in limestone above the delicate storefronts. Apartments sold for $28,000 to $52,000, the higher price perhaps referring to the pair of duplexes at the top, which split the 11th floor and roof level between them, essentially full-floor apartments. A 1927 advertisement in the New York Times gives an idea of the target market. Before you decide where you will live this winter, before you move in from the country, come take a look at this new 100% cooperative apartment. In a 1928 article in Arts and Decoration, Mr. Murchison said that a key advantage of a co-op was that the shareholders could, quote, weed out undesirables and keep the social status of the house up to where it belongs. That was certainly crucial in Mrs. Post's building, she being the author of the Etiquette book and a member of the Tuxedo Park gentry. Early purchasers at number 133 were of the same social class, members of clubs like the Union, Colony, Racket, and Century. Half were listed in the social register. One was Schuyler Shefflin, associated with the drug business founded by his ancestors in 1794. A member of the Society of Colonial Wars, the St. Nicholas Society, and other old family organizations, he was well up in the social pecking order and had the best apartment in the building, the south-facing penthouse duplex. According to his granddaughter, Julia Shefflin, he and his wife took the 17-room duplex for their 2 children, 4 servants, and his wife's mother, Mrs. Charles Cooper. They were very close. It was a 3-way marriage, Ms. Shefflin said. It is possible that the Shefflin family was involved with not only the planning of their own unusually large apartment, but also the building project itself. Certainly, they knew Mrs. Post and her co-op. Mrs. Shefflin's family had a house in Tuxedo Park. Original plans of the Shefflin apartment do not survive, but old photographs show a living room leading onto the terrace with arched French doors, a large half-round stair hall, and a tile-floored breakfast room with Majolica-style plates on the wall and Italian Renaissance-style furniture. These opened onto a broad south-facing terrace with a fountain, salvaged antique columns, and, in 1929, sweeping south views to the Chrysler Building under construction. Judging by recent photographs of the apartment, the architecture of the principal rooms is little different. Just the fireplace and some panel moldings have been lost. The Times reported in 1940 that the place had cost $100,000 in all, apparently with furnishings, a lot for Lexington Avenue. Ms. Shefflin said her grandfather wasn't concerned about cutting a fine figure, and indeed the family gave up their Tuxedo Park connections to build a house in Monroe, New York. Mr. and Mrs. Shefflin died in the 1930s, and the lower floor of their apartment was split in two, leaving a duplex with fewer rooms on the floor below. That duplex was purchased by Mr. Madoff and his wife Ruth around 1984. Seized by federal marshals in July, it is now listed with Sotheby's International Realty for $9.9 million. The sale will benefit victims of Mr. Madoff's $65 billion Ponzi scheme. Howard R. Golden was the architect for the Madoff's 1984 renovation, and says the original decorator was Angelo Donghia. Mr. Golden described it as a small job, a greenhouse extension, and some bathroom and closet changes. He said some clients were so prominent that he was asked not to list their names on the building permit, but the Madoffs had no such worries at the time. As the clients were not demanding and paid promptly, it went without a hitch, Mr. Golden remembered. He did not recall that the Madoffs had been his clients until recently, and he doesn't believe that he ever met Mr. Madoff. But when I saw his wife's picture in the paper, I thought she looked familiar, he said. Thank you for listening. Again, a link to the written version of this post is included in the show notes. Metropolitan Miscellanies is a reader-supported publication. To receive new posts and support my work, consider becoming a free or paid subscriber. The music you hear at the beginning and end of this episode is Schubert's Arpeggione Sonata, performed by Hans Goldstein and Clinton Adams, provided by an EFF open audio license. Thank you to Jeff Kowalski for his assistance with audio editing.